everybody. Today we're going to talk a little bit about what are statistical questions and how can we ask them in a way that'll get us some real answers. So first, what's a statistical question? Well, a statistical question is a question you can ask somebody that is going to give you a variety of answers. So let's think of an example. You could ask a group of people, what's your height? So people are going to tell you different things. I would tell you I'm 5'4". Somebody else in class might tell you they're 4'9". They might be 6'3". It all depends on who you ask what their answer is going to be. Not every single person is going to have the same answer. So let's give some examples of statistical questions. You could ask, how tall are you? What's your favorite color? How many siblings do you have? So all of these questions are going to be different depending on who you ask. Now you might find a couple people that have similar answers, but you would expect if you asked your best friend, their answers would probably be a little bit different than if you asked yourself or if you asked your parent or a teacher or Shaquille O'Neal. So these are statistical questions because they're going to have a different answer depending on who you ask. So you can collect some information that 6 people said they were 5 feet tall. One person is 5'1". You can start to build a data set. That's a set of numbers or a set of information that corresponds to a statistical question like this. Now, on the other hand, while you have statistical questions here, there are also non-statistical questions. And non-statistical questions are just questions that only have one correct answer. Questions like, what's the weather like today in Lee, Maine? Questions like, what time does first period start at Mount Jefferson Junior High? Questions like, what are the ingredients in peanut butter? So those things that only have one correct answer, they're non-statistical questions, and we're not going to use them when we talk about statistics. We're only going to use these questions that have varied answers, that have a variety of things people could say and be correct, because they're talking about themselves or situations that change depending on where you are or who you are. So the important thing is that once we have our statistical question that can have more than one answer, that'll have a variety of answers, we need to figure out how to ask it and who to ask. The first thing we need to know what is the right population to ask. So a population is just an entire group. And your population that you want to ask your statistical question to is going to change depending on your question. If your question is, what do students like to eat for lunch? You're not going to ask teachers. Teachers wouldn't be your population. The population you're talking about is students. And maybe you're specific of, what is the favorite lunch of 6th graders? Well, your population is all 6th graders. If you're asking, what kind of food does your dog eat? Your population is going to be dogs that are pets. Now you could be more specific in what kind of food do Labradors eat, and you ask all Labrador Retriever owners. Your population is Labrador Retrievers. But your population is going to fit your question. So once you figure out your population, the entire group considered by your statistical question, what's your favorite lunch if you're a 6th grader? What kind of food does a Labrador eat? Then you're going to decide, okay, is it reasonable that I could ask the entire population? So if we were in school and you said, okay, what is the favorite color of 7th graders at Mount Jefferson Junior High? Well, there are only 20 of you. So sampling the entire population, 24 people, that wouldn't take very much time. You would just walk around and ask 19 different people, 20 people, what's your favorite color? Might take you 10 minutes. So in that kind of case, you would sample the entire population. And when the population you're sampling, you're talking about in your statistical question is small, it's reasonable to ask the whole population. But when you start talking about bigger and bigger populations, all right, what's the favorite food of all 6th grade students in Penobscot County? Ooh, that'd take a really long time to sample all those people, right? What's the favorite food of all people in Maine? It's not reasonable for you to go around and ask the entire population that statistical question. So that's when we get into the idea of sampling and the importance of getting a correct sample. So samples are taking a portion of your population and using them to represent your population as a whole. So your sample is a portion of this population that's used to represent the entire population. And when we're asking statistical questions, it's really important that we sample correctly so that we get the correct answers to our statistical questions. So the first thing to decide is how big you want your sample to be. If you have a population of 1 million and you only ask one person, that sample isn't big enough, right? That's such a small percentage of the people you ask. But if you have an entire population of 1 million people and you ask 1,000, that's a pretty good sample. If you have a population of 500 and you ask 25, that's a pretty good sample where asking the entire population isn't reasonable, but you can get a good percentage of that population in your sample. So the next thing to consider once you've got your right sample size is figuring out, well, who do you pick? Who gets to be part of your sample? So there's one good way to figure out who gets to be part of your sample. So when we have an entire population we're looking at, let's say we're looking at all the students at Mount Jefferson Junior High. Well, when we're collecting a sample of that population, taking a small chunk of students to represent the whole school, we're not just going to pick one subgroup, one smaller group. We're not just going to pick, okay, 5th graders all represent Mount Jefferson Junior High. All girls who play soccer represent all of Mount Jefferson Junior High. People in band. That's called a biased sample. So a biased sample is just any sample that doesn't represent the whole population. So we know that we can't just pick all girls who play soccer, all band kids, all people that are left-handed, because they're not going to represent the whole population. In order to get a good sample, you need to pick people using a method that gives everybody an equal chance of getting picked. This is called a random sample. So with that random sample, again, every individual in the entire population has an equal chance of being chosen to be part of the sample. So we know what a random sample is, and we know that it's important, but how do we take a random sample? What would that look like? What do those methods look like? So there are a few ways to make sure you get a random sample. So one way to make sure you're getting a random sample of your population is to use a pattern, such as selecting every 4th person you see. So if you were going to ask, well, what's your favorite food that Mount Jefferson Junior High serves? You could ask every 4th person that enters the gym. Another way is you could use a method where everyone has an equal chance of being selected, like drawing names out of a hat. You could also divide the population into groups, like by grade level, and then randomly select people from each group. So these are 3 ways to get a really good random sample. And I think it's important that we also take a look at some sampling methods that would give you a biased sample. So these are some biased sampling methods, and I'm writing in red so that we remember that these don't work. These are going to give you a sample that doesn't represent your population. So an example of biased sampling is getting people to volunteer to take a survey. So just asking people to volunteer to answer your statistical question is not going to give you a good sample of your population. Another way that's not going to be a good way to sample your population is to pick people that are easy to get to, like the people that are in the room with you at the same time, the people that sit near you. Those are called convenience samples, and just because they're easy to get to, those people, that doesn't mean that they represent the population equally. And another final way that you would get a really biased sample besides asking people to volunteer or getting those convenient people, the people that are easy to get to, is to choose people in a group, such as all the students in band, all the students that play soccer, all of the boys that wear Nikes. So these groups, they're called subgroups. So our school has a lot of them. We have students that like to play basketball, students that like to play soccer, people who are in chorus or band or wear Nikes or don't wear jeans. So these small subgroups, there are people that exist in them, but if you only take people in the subgroup, the people that don't like to wear jeans or people who don't have a cell phone, that's not going to represent the whole population of students at our school. So it's important when you're sampling that you use methods that give everyone an equal chance of being chosen. So today we had two big lessons. One is, what is a statistical question? So we remember a statistical question is a question that can be asked of people that they're going to give you a variety of answers. There's no one right answer to a statistical question. The final thing that we talked about today is, how do we take a good sample of a population? So we know that in order to take a good sample of a population, we need to use random sampling. That is giving everybody in the population an equal chance of getting picked. And we can do that using patterns, drawing names out of hats, dividing our population into groups, subgroups, and then sampling each subgroup. So these are the two things we've talked about today. I hope you learned a little bit about statistics. All right, have a great day and work hard.